In these past couple years, I have consumed a lot of spiritual content. I've read so many books. I've watched so many hours of channeling, of interviews, really just wanting to download all the information. And in the beginning, I was open to everything. And as time went on, and I started to create my own idea of spiritual truth for myself, I gravitated more towards the channeled content, channeled channeled information that was coming from the higher realms. And so there was going to be a less of a filter from the ego. And I was primarily focusing on people who I felt like I could trust, who I felt like the information coming through was not being filtered so much. And a lot of that has changed for me. I feel like right now I'm not reading any books. I'm barely watching anything other than a couple channels that I will mention later on. When I say channels, I'm talking YouTube channels, not channelers. And so in this video, I want to talk about my experience and what I have discovered. Obviously, all this is from my perspective, but I haven't seen. Hold on. I have a delivery. This happened with my last video. I will say, my intuition over time is getting really good. I just had this feeling. I was like, I'm going to be doing this video and I'm going to get the delivery. They're going to come to the door. They're going to need me to come out there. And of course, it happened. So, where were we? I've consumed a lot of information. I've developed my own sense of what is true, right? From my perspective. And I've I didn't realize when I first started coming into this spiritual content that it could be distorted, that it could be like polluted, that it could not be 100% truthful. I was not even considering that because spiritual knowledge to me coming in was the truth. This was me accessing this whole this whole group of ideas that my friends and family they had no clue about, right? So I was just like, "Oh my gosh, this is so great." And I just started accepting all of it. And as I said, I started to get more and more and more selective, and it's gotten to the point now where I'm almost completely shut off because there's this body of information that had come with the new age, this wave of this wave of spiritual living, right, in the 1900s. And that's what I want to talk about in this video. So if you yourself, you've consumed a lot of stuff, maybe you know what I'm talking about here, but maybe not, right? And that's what I want to get into. I want to explore and just so you know, I don't have all the answers. I don't have it all figured out. I don't pretend to, right? I'm showing up here as this is my journey. This is what I'm uncovering. This is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm sensing. And to start the conversation and to inspire you to kind of do the same thing, right? What have you learned? What do you believe to be true, right? For me, I always want to maintain that open mind while also fitting the pieces together with my own intuitive sense and my own wisdom that I've constructed. Because as I take in information, I always do a check to see, okay, does this match into what I already believe to be true? And that got me pretty far, but it did end up kind of building up a lot of false narratives, right? And kind of perpetuating those. Okay. So yes, we are spiritual beings. I I fully I'm on board with that, right? We are all spiritual beings, we're all spirit, we're all one, right? But no, earth is not heaven on earth, right? We have to create our own heaven on earth. I believe this, right? For me, with this point, what I didn't get from the channelers is why earth is this way. And I didn't realize that for 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 this wisdom coming in, there are rules and regulations as to what we on earth are allowed to know. There are official narratives and stories and history that is being referenced before we're being told. So the official record is 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 being used, right? And it can be manipulated. These rules are held in place and enforced by what is known as the Federation. And I'm going to put on here on the screen the Federation that I'm referring to. At this point, I'm trying to keep certain keywords out of my videos because I don't want to be associated with this content just yet. I don't know if this is this is going to go how I'm expecting, but on some of this stuff, I'm going to be showing it on the screen, and I'll tell you in case you're just listening. And so some of what this federation, okay, let's say it this way. Some will say that this is a federation of light, right? Red flag. This federation can be seen as like a government, right? A government over not just Earth, right? But much more than that. My specific knowledge on the jurisdiction and how expansive that is, that I'm not there yet in terms of my own knowledge, and I don't know if I really need it because I'm here on Earth. I'm not uh, anything that's too far out of Earth it's not really, it doesn't feel like it's pertaining to me at this moment. But spiritual information right away, spiritual information in this galactic component, that is not a lot of channel material is talking about the galactic stuff. And I think part of the reason why is the ones who are channeling the information, the ones who are asking and prompting these guides, these beings for information, they aren't always necessarily thinking beyond Earth. We're thinking about our lives, our problems. We're trying to figure out what's going on here. So maybe that's part of the reason why we don't have in our spiritual information a lot of outer Earth references, explanations, right? But I think that it is important because how does Earth fit into this piece of the whole? And why are we here, right? Now, the why are we here, there's multiple answers to that, right? Because we have personally, collectively, everybody's going to have a little bit of a different perspective. But what I'm trying to explain is that it's it was very specific to us only being on Earth, and I could never really get a lot of that other information. Now, on streaming services like Gaia, they have all kinds of like galactic stuff and it's aliens and extraterrestrials. And you're like, wow, this is really cool. But it's like, what does it have to do with me? Right. Well, there's not a lot on Gaia where it's talking about the Earth component, the extraterrestrials on this terrain of our planet, how they have been here before us, how they are still here, how we've coexisted with other races for a very long time, just as a human species. And with that streaming service, Gaia, there was a lot of really cool, exciting things when I was first coming in. But then I came across this this series, and this was probably, I'd say maybe 2.5 years ago. There was a series on Gaia, right? Galactic Messages. And this just completely just it was so different than anything else on that streaming service. And I was just kind of shocked. Me and my wife Sarah, we were just shocked. We were just it's like the Matrix, right, on the planet, and it was like the moon. We were not ready for it. This whole idea of control and manipulation. I mean, it was a lot, right? I'm coming on and I'm doing this YouTube, but I've shared this with a couple other people, not a lot, because I know most people are not open to this stuff, the spiritual stuff. Oh yeah, sure, you know. But then when you're adding this other galactic component, all of a sudden you're losing people. They're like, you're crazy, right? You're like, you know, you're living in the world of science fiction, you know? Science fiction. Or I should say science fiction, because it's very real. That whole genre is to distort what is actually true, right? And what is actually possible, making us think that it's fiction. It's make believe, right? Well, they can put it out there and then we believe that. And then when we hear references to it, we're like, it's just fiction. It's just made up. Works very well. Okay. So this federation being of light, right? This federation that's in the galaxy, right? Nobody is coming to save us, right? If you've heard anybody come on and they're talking about this federation, nobody is actually coming to save us. We're doing that ourselves. Well, we're supposed to be doing that ourselves. That is our own responsibility, shall I say. So nobody's coming to save us, right? There's no knight in shining armor, right? We're we're not waiting. I'm not waiting, right? So this is another kind of corner of what I'm moving into, is this idea of this spiritual understanding. Being a spiritual person means keeping to yourself, meditating all day, and minding your own business. Because if we had known what I believe is to be true, and which I communicate through these videos, is that things are very different than they seem. Very different. Our whole history is extremely different. Ideas like religion they're not what we think. And if you come to believe that, hey, I just want to go within and I just want to be at peace. And it's like, honestly, that is great. That's a great starting point. That's where you should start. But for me, I went within, right? I transcended my ego. I achieved peace. I didn't need to meditate all day. And then I was just kind of going along, consuming a lot of this new age spiritual information. And then one day, all of a sudden, I come across something like galactic messages. And it was just like, okay, whoa, that was crazy. And then I went back to what I was used to consuming, right? Used to watching, used to reading, used to listening to. And then all of a sudden, I I came back to this channel, YouTube channel, and that is the Galactic Agency. And these guys, they're the ones that put together the galactic messages, right? But I would look through a lot of their videos and it would just feel so far out there. So I had known about them for a while, but I was just like, it just doesn't feel, I follow my intuition, it just didn't feel like it was time. Well, a few months ago, I was like, okay, I think it's time. Let's just watch a couple of these things and started watching some things on like the history and like the social agendas and kind of the story behind religion and how that came about on Earth. And was just, just a little bit pissed off, because where was all this in all of the literally hundreds of hours of consuming all this other content from a vast array of people, right? Where was any of this? Why? How could this be, right? Well, I didn't understand that this federation that I've been referring to, they are the government. They have the regulations. There are rules why beings can't just say whatever they want to us, why they can't show up in physical form, why we can't hear their audio, why we can't see real photos of them. Text is the only way they are allowed to communicate. Can they break the rules? Yeah. Will they be punished by this Federation of Light if they break the rules? Yes, which is why they don't. And if information is coming from these higher realms, they don't live in a world of duality. So they're looking at you down here on Earth and they're going, "Oh, well, this is the information you're looking for, or this is what we think would be helpful," but they don't live in a world of duality. That's not where they exist. And they know, hey, as a soul, you chose to be there on Earth, and here's some information to help you go within and connect with that. And then when they would get prompts for history, it's like, oh, now, because we don't know the specific history of Earth, right? And you want it right now, we're going to reference the official record. You can think of this as like the Wikipedia of our whole galactic history as a planet. Well, what's stopping this from being corrupted? What's stopping this from having the history be rewritten, right? Because up there, if we're here on in 3D, right? And it's a higher frequency, well, they still have egos, right? I mean, it's of course this stuff it can be manipulated. And so that's what I've come up with so far. You can leave a comment if you're seeing it another way, right? Please please let me know. I would be very curious because I'll want to talk to my wife about this stuff, and she's just like, "Listen, I'm focused on I'm doing my thing." She knows a lot about this stuff, but for me, it's just part of my personality. I want to understand. I want to figure it out. And so this is me. This is me figuring it out. Okay. So another distinction here would be it's like the information of Earth, right? And why we're here, and you could it's the difference between it being Wikipedia and like Akasha, the Akashic records. Well, the Akashic records is that, I mean, that's extremely vast, and that does include all kinds of information. But it is still being filtered by you. It has to be understood by you, drawing it into, right? And making sense of it in your reality, in this reality. But what about the idea of like multiple realities? So I think that when a lot of people are accessing information, I think that one really important component is the astral plane influence, because there's a lot of crazy stuff going on in the astral all the time. And there is a massive amount of manipulation there. And it still just shocks me how little people talk about it in today's world, because it's like everything is astral, but it's like that sixth sense, right? It's it's in our physical reality, but we can't interact with it with our five senses. It's beyond that. So a lot of this information, I mean, for this information to actually get to us humans, right? It has to be received by humans, right? There's one exception to that, which I'll cover in a little bit. Another YouTube channel. So this information is coming to us as humans. We are we are so heavily influenced by thoughts and emotions, right? And so channelers, they're people just like you and me, right? They're just able to access this information. But there's lots going on. There's the quality of the information, and then there's the making sense of it, the translating of it. And there are so many negative entities here on this planet that are vying for control, that are they're doing their absolute best to keep things from changing as quickly as they already are, because they are changing. Times are changing. People are having their awakenings, right? And so whatever they can do to kind of mislead people, to mess with the channelers, they're going to do it. Absolutely. And that's just a truth right there. So there are a few things with the history of Earth that it's not just what the mainstream believes, right? Because when you come into this spiritual world, you're all of a sudden you're non-mainstream. But then you start learning things that are very specific, and they're this alternative idea, right? And if you watched the Bashar Gaia most recent series, the first episode, he immediately goes into the history, the true history of humans on Earth, right? And I can't tell you how many times I had heard this story, right? And it's not this is not evolution, right? We're not talking about evolution or religion. We're not talking about either one of those. We set those aside because we're not dealing with mainstream. We're dealing with spiritual teachings, extraterrestrial teachings. And so the history of of us being human on Earth is how that version of the story goes, the one that I had heard so many times, is that we were created using a bunch of different races, and we were created as humans on this planet. And it was done through genetic, manipulation. And so that's how we came about. But I don't know why I thought that it was true, because I can't tell you how many times I also heard that we're Lyran, that we are all from Lyra as human. The human originates from Lyra. And during the Lyrian Wars, they went all over the universe, right? Which is how we got to Earth. So this idea of we were created on Earth, I don't know why I believe that. That's got to be false. We absolutely were not. Our species was not created here. There are humans outside of Earth, right? I say right as if you're just like, oh yeah, of course. Some of you, yeah. Some of you are like, okay, I'm like barely hanging on with you. So that's the first part. Now, how about the why? How many of you heard that we were created so that we could mine gold for these other races, right? That we were created to be slaves. Of course. Oh man, that is just so twisted. It's so twisted. Of course they want you as somebody who's seeking spiritual knowledge to think that you're a slave. Whew, mission accomplished. Ooh, man, that's impressive. Demented, but very impressive. Because you had me going for a couple years there, and oh man, I honestly I cannot tell you how many teachers I had heard that from, and to realize that it is just total BS was actually it was a relief, right? Because it's like, yeah, no, that never felt right. That never felt right. And you coming up with your own sense of truth, this is why it's so important, right? Only you can know what's true for you. And these guys that believe these two things that I've covered, they can continue to believe them, that's fine. For me, I want to know what the real deal is. Because if we are being controlled here, this is a key component to it, right? So we're peeling back the layers here. All right. Okay, so I have another one. I have another one that's a spiritual, kind of like an insider thing that you learn about. How many of us have heard about this Christ consciousness grid, right? That Jesus was real. That this is what basically his legacy was, right? He came here to give Earth this grid. Well, that has you assuming that Jesus was real. What if Jesus was not real? I'm just kind of throwing some of the stuff out there. What if he was created by a group of people many years ago to control another group of people? That way they wouldn't have to go to war all the time and they wouldn't have to police them in order to manipulate and control them. Wow. I've never heard a spiritual teacher talk about that. Oh yeah, it's because they don't have that piece of information. It doesn't exist in the Wikipedia of this Federation of Light. So this is where I get fired up. I can't tell you, when I was growing up, I never believed in any person that could have been Jesus. I just could not believe it. I also could not believe in a God that wanted to punish me and was so self-centered and wasn't going to let me in heaven because I wasn't, believing in his religion. It just seems so arbitrary. Like, don't you love me? Aren't I? I'm your son. You created me. Like, this is twisted. So I never believed that. And then all of a sudden I'm reading spirituality, Christ consciousness grid. Oh, I guess Jesus was real. Silly me. You can't just believe anything that you read, even if so many people believe it, right? So, in the spiritual community, in this idea, you really need to you got to strengthen that intuition, right? What feels right? If you want to explore, be open to explore. You will have these questions. I don't have answers to all my questions. And believe me, as time goes on, I have more and more. But you just keep those questions in your mind and you will be led to the answers. And that is how I have been led to these answers. But I had to unplug from all of that in order to be led in this other direction. So, this other idea that is out there is this idea of ascension. And I do believe ascension to be true, but again, there's different takes on it. I think that from the help of um, this lovely person, Marie Swa, who also has a YouTube channel, she helped me realize a lot of these things, along with her team. That the information came through on Galactic Agency and Galactic Messages on Gaia. This idea of ascension was so well played because it keeps us as spiritual seekers, as minding our own business. This idea of ascension where, well, it all kind of work itself out. Along those lines, it reminds me of Lao Tzu and the Tao Te Ching, whom Wayne Dyer was like all about. That was like his obsession at the end of his life. Do nothing and leave nothing undone. Do nothing. So the chaos in the world, which is what the Tao Te Ching is kind of all about, and Taoism is there's so much chaos in the world, and I really resonated with this. There's so much chaos in the world, but you can just sit still in a state of meditation and just let nothing affect you. That's doing nothing. That's not changing anything, and that's fine. No judgment. But to make it seem like you're spiritual if you do nothing, that's what you need to be concerned about, okay? That's the problem. That's my issue. That's what gets me fired up. Because it's a great way to control us spiritual people. Okay. So, another one, right? With the mainstream is eating vegan. This is a very complicated topic, and I was vegan for 14 years up until about a couple months ago. 14 years of being vegan because I didn't want to harm animals and I felt like it was raising my vibration and it just seemed like it was the right thing to do. It also felt very, very spiritually advantageous to be eating this way, to be living in alignment, right, with the animals. But I never really thought about how we, as the humans on this planet, we evolved relying on animals. What I didn't always know is that Lyrans outside of Earth, not necessarily the case. Most Lyrans are vegan. So it's in our programming to be thinking, oh, yeah, this is the right way. However, early on with the days of our planet, either co- through conspiracy or not, we didn't have the vegetation we really needed to be thriving. And so our bodies adapted to eating animals. How messed up is that? It's pretty messed up. And again, that prompted me to get started doing these videos pretty quickly because, like I said, it's 14 years of really feeling like I was doing the right thing. When all along I was just following the path that was laid out long, long time ago, back in the days of India, when it was the cow became sacred. And yeah, don't eat meat, right? We'll cover this in future videos because I know that I am not the only one out there that had a hard time eating meat, right? That really wanted to be vegan and they felt like that was the spiritually superior thing to do. And so I am of the opinion as of now, which is different than where I was 4 months ago, that the true history of Earth, mainstream or mainstream spiritual, the true history of Earth and of mankind is total bull, completely made up. And I'm starting to realize that the primary method of control for us is to keep us lost, to keep us confused, unhealthy, depressed, following the rules, wanting to do what most people are doing, so following the status quo, and minding our own business. So, so that's what I have today, right? The It's just amazing the levels because when you get into spirituality, you're like, wow, nobody else gets it, right? I had my awakening. It's like I can see clearly now. And then you consume all this information like I did, and you're like, wow, I really know what's going on. And then you come across some other stuff, and it's like, wow, that is not it's not what you were expecting at all. So as I've said in my other videos that I've done so far, is just continue to check in, right? Continue to be open-minded. Continue to hold those questions of things that you really want more understanding of because you will draw those to you. You are still a spiritual being, okay? Even if you start to realize like I have, and it's okay if you don't, that there's so many things that are you now see them as false, as just made up, as just another ploy to maintain control. So let me know. Are you in this boat? Have I have I just totally missed it? The channels that I mentioned, go check those out. They've everything that I have learned from them, as I start to integrate it into what I've already learned, it all completely matches. But what they've proceeded to do is to debunk all of these things that spiritual teachers had taught me. What's up with that? That's crazy. Why do they do that? Because they're fired up themselves. That they are not being supported by this Federation of Light. Things are not as rosy as a lot of the spiritual teachings here on earth portray them to be. And so that's why I'm here. Leave me a comment. Let me know. Does this ring true or not. And I will see you in the next video.